Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be taking a look at Chris Langan,
Oh, yeah.
the uh, the man with one of the highest recorded
We're
IQs.
the smartest people walking around.
Yeah, yeah. So we had this interview. A listener sent this in, a leaked interview by Michael Knowles.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's really something.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's not, a professor at Harvard or some, billionaire tech giant or whatever.
Yeah.
Lives on a farm.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a head scratcher, right?
It is, especially when you consider just the sheer intellectual capacity that he's supposed to possess. I mean, we're talking about somebody who's claimed to have an IQ somewhere between 195 and 210.
Yeah, yeah,
And he really opens up in this interview about his unusual path
yeah,
and his unique perspective on pretty much everything,
yeah.
from God to aliens, all viewed through the lens of his cognitive-theoretic model of the universe,
Yeah, the CTMU.
the CTMU.
Before we get lost in the cosmos with that, can we just break that down a little bit?
Sure.
Like, what is that? It's a theory of everything, but what are the core pieces of it?
Well, you can almost imagine it as trying to understand reality as this giant puzzle
Okay.
where the pieces are both physical-like stuff
Uh-huh.
and language.
Okay.
That's essentially what Langan's doing with the CTMU. So
Right.
he's merging physics, inspired by Einstein, with linguistic philosophy, building on Bertrand Russell's work.
So it's not just about like what is, it's also about how we describe what is.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a pretty different way of looking at things.
Yeah. Langan calls this fusion logical geometric. He sees logic and geometry as inseparable.
Mm.
So it suggests that reality has this structure that we can observe, and then this language with which we can understand it.
Mm.
And his goal, to discover absolute universal truths
Within this framework.
within that framework. Yeah.
I was reading about that story about his college math instructor dismissing his questions.
Right.
And I'm thinking, like, you'd think a professor would really encourage that kind of curiosity,
Yeah, you would think.
especially from someone with Langan's ability.
It's kind of like the classic trope of the genius who just doesn't fit in.
Right, right. Yeah.
And it really kind of highlights how sometimes even the brightest minds, they don't really fit neatly into conventional systems. And Langan didn't pursue the typical academic route. Instead, he took on a variety of jobs, working on ranches, factories, even bouncing at bars.
Yeah. That's quite a resume for someone who could probably solve complex equations in their sleep.
Yeah, makes you wonder what kind of insights he gained from those experiences.
Yeah. It's like he was seeking out a diverse range of human interactions,
Yeah.
Almost deliberately.
Yeah, it seems like those experiences really fed into his search for meaning, which ultimately led him to develop the CTMU.
Right?
It wasn't just an intellectual exercise, right?
Yeah.
It was driven by this deeper need to understand his place in the world.
Okay, so that brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
God, where does that fit into Langan's model?
For Langan, the answer is pretty straightforward. He believes that God exists
Okay.
and that God is the identity of reality itself.
Whoa.
So we're talking omniscience, omnipotence,
A
omnipresence,
whole 9 yards.
the whole package.
Okay. So is he basically saying that God is the universe and everything in it?
It's more nuanced than just classic pantheism.
Okay.
He describes it as panentheism, where God isn't just within the universe, but also transcends it. So God is both the container and the contained.
Okay.
The source and the substance of all that is.
So if I'm picturing this right, it's like those Russian nesting dolls.
Yeah.
God is like the biggest doll that encompasses all the others, but he's also present within each individual doll as well.
It's a good way to visualize it.
Okay.
And this leads us to another kind of mind-bending concept in Langdon's model, the idea of self-simulation.
Okay. Self-simulation. All right, I'm ready. Melt my brain.
All right, so imagine our physical reality as a simulation,
Okay.
but not created by some outside force,
Okay.
created by God himself. So think of it like a video game, where God is both the programmer and the player experiencing that simulation from within.
Hold on. If we're living in God's simulation, does that mean our choices don't really matter?
That's a great question.
Are we just puppets on strings?
Well, Langan actually tackles the question of free will head on.
Okay.
And his answer might surprise you. He believes we do have free will,
Hmm.
but it's far more complex than just this traditional view of cause and effect.
Hmm.
He argues that the classic model, that kind of fixed reality with points in space and time, doesn't fully align with what we know from quantum physics.
So the the Newtonian clockwork universe
Right.
is out.
Exactly. Instead, Langan proposes this concept called metacausation,
Metacausation.
where cause and effect can operate in both directions, from past to future and future to past.
Wow, okay.
It's like this cosmic feedback loop, where our choices in the present are influenced by our past and shape the possibilities of our future, which can then loop back and influence our present.
Okay, that's giving me a little bit of a time travel headache.
Yeah.
But if I'm understanding this correctly, it means our actions have real consequences,
Yes.
even if the flow of time isn't as straightforward as we once thought.
That's the essence of it.
Okay.
Our choices matter, even within this grand, interconnected system that Langan describes.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. God, the universe, free will, and time itself. Where do we go from here?
Well, Langan doesn't stop there. He goes on to explore the nature of consciousness, the existence of evil, and even the possibility of aliens.
Oh, boy.
And his perspective on these topics is just as thought-provoking as his cosmological model. Are you ready to dive deeper?
So we were just talking about Langan's ideas about consciousness. You mentioned it gets even more interesting. How so?
Well, Langan doesn't just limit consciousness to humans or even living beings. He says that consciousness is present at every level of the universe.
Is he suggesting that even rocks and trees have some kind of, consciousness? That seems like a stretch.
It's not consciousness in the way we typically think about it.
Okay.
Having thoughts and feelings and stuff. But remember those identity operators?
Yeah.
Those building blocks of Langan's CTMU?
Uh-huh.
He sees those as the fundamental units of consciousness.
Right. Okay. Can you just refresh my memory about how those work again?
Sure. So picture tiny computers, far smaller than atoms, that are constantly taking in information, processing it, and then generating some kind of output.
Okay.
That cycle, that input, processing, output, that's a very rudimentary form of consciousness.
So even inanimate objects are, in a way, like thinking.
More like processing.
Processing. Okay.
But yeah, because these identity operators are everywhere, Langan argues that consciousness is woven into the fabric of reality itself. And we, with our complex brains, we're experiencing it on a much, much higher level.
So we're not just observers of the universe.
Right.
We're active participants in shaping its consciousness.
Exactly.
That's a pretty wild idea.
It is. Our choices, our interactions with the world around us, even our thoughts, they all contribute to this ongoing evolution of consciousness within Langan's model.
Okay, so we've explored God, the nature of reality, free will, now consciousness. What about the concept of evil? Where does that fit in? The interview mentions, Satan and the devil. Is he talking about like a literal biblical devil here?
Langan does confirm the existence of Satan and the devil, but it's not quite as simplistic as, the horned figure with a pitchfork we often imagine.
Okay.
He draws a distinction between Satan and Lucifer.
Okay.
So Satan, he argues, is incoherent and reliant on humans to carry out his will.
So Satan is more like this force of chaos that kind of exploits our weaknesses?
Exactly.
Okay.
He represents the opposite of God's perfection.
Yeah.
The antithesis of coherence and truth.
And what about Lucifer then? Where does he fit into all of this?
Langan sees Lucifer as the fallen angel of light, walking this fine line between good and evil.
Okay.
He's a much more ambiguous figure who ultimately is serving God's purpose even in his rebellion.
It sounds like Langan's suggesting there's this cosmic battle playing out between these forces of good and evil.
Yeah, and he sees this battle reflected in the state of the world today.
Right. He's highly critical of what he calls monopoly capitalism and the globalist agenda.
Right.
But how does he distinguish between what he considers like good capitalism and bad capitalism?
He's a proponent of laissez-faire capitalism,
Yeah.
where individuals are free to pursue their economic interests without interference.
Okay.
He sees that as a system that really fosters innovation and prosperity. But when a small group gains too much control, stifling competition, dictating choices, that's when capitalism becomes problematic.
And he uses examples like the push for electric cars and the phasing out of incandescent light bulbs as evidence of this control.
Right.
He sees these policies as being driven by this powerful elite that's dictating what we can buy and how we live, even if it goes against individual preferences, or, what might be best for the environment.
Right. He argues that this concentration of power and control, it's a very slippery slope towards technocracy,
Okay.
a system where technology is used to manipulate and control society.
So it's interesting, he's not anti-technology in itself.
Right.
But he's very wary of who controls it
Exactly.
and how it's used.
He sees technology as a tool, that can be used for good or evil.
Okay.
It all depends on who's wielding it and for what purpose.
This is all starting to sound a bit bleak, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like painting this picture of a world where these powerful forces are manipulating events and ordinary people are left feeling powerless.
Yeah.
Does Langan offer any, solutions to this? Or ways to resist this control?
He does.
Oh.
He advocates for a return to traditional values, a reawakening of spiritual awareness, and active resistance to those who seek to control us. And it's not about violent revolution or anything.
Okay.
It's about rediscovering truth, reclaiming our personal responsibility, and aligning ourselves with God's will.
It's like a call to action.
It is.
It's like a reminder that we're not just passive players in this game, you know? We have a choice.
Exactly. And speaking of choices, we haven't even touched on one of the most intriguing aspects of Langan's worldview, his openness to the possibility of aliens.
Yeah, the interview definitely takes a turn for the X-Files there.
Yeah.
But what makes Langan's approach to this topic different than, your typical UFO enthusiast?
Well, he doesn't just jump to conclusions or make outlandish claims.
Okay.
He acknowledges that the intelligence community takes the possibility of alien life very seriously. And he even shares his own personal experience with a UFO.
He's seen a UFO himself.
He has. He describes seeing this strange, unmoving object in the sky while working on a ranch out in Montana.
Really?
Yeah. Now, he doesn't claim to know what it was,
Mm.
but he acknowledges the strangeness of it and the fact that it defied explanation.
So he's open to the possibility, but he also recognizes that there might be other explanations for some of the more bizarre phenomena that people report. It's a very nuanced take, which is kind of refreshing, honestly, in a field that's often dominated by sensationalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he even raises this very interesting possibility that these unexplained phenomena, whatever their origin, might be influencing the global elite in ways that we're not fully aware of.
Okay. That's a little unsettling.
It is.
It's like adding another layer of complexity to this already intricate web of, power and control that we've been talking about.
It adds a whole new dimension to the conversation.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the final piece of Langan's puzzle, his concept of the teleological economy. Are you ready to explore that?
Okay, teleological economy.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of like something out of a philosophy textbook.
Wow.
What's the idea here?
Imagine a system of exchange, but instead of money,
Okay.
the currency is truth, meaning, and beauty. That's the essence of Langan's teleological economy.
Okay.
It suggests there's this deeper level of interaction happening in the universe,
Uh-huh.
one that goes beyond just, material possessions or financial gain.
So it's about aligning ourselves with something bigger.
Exactly.
Something more meaningful than just chasing dollars and cents.
Yeah, Langan sees the traditional economy as a limited form of what he calls telesis,
Telesis.
which is purposeful action
Okay.
or striving towards a goal.
Okay.
So we use money to achieve certain aims.
Right.
But he's suggesting there's this grander economy at play where truth, beauty, and meaning are the ultimate goals.
And he ties this concept of beauty to objective truth, too, right?
Yes.
He's not just talking about, subjective preferences.
Right. He believes that beauty is inherent in the structure of reality itself, a reflection of God's will.
Okay.
And he contrasts this with a lot of modern art, which he finds distasteful and lacking true beauty.
Right.
It's a controversial stance for sure,
Yeah.
but it highlights how seriously he takes this connection between beauty and objective truth.
When he talks about beauty being a reflection of God's will, it reminds me of those moments when you experience something truly awe-inspiring. Like a breathtaking sunset or a powerful piece of music or even a profound scientific discovery.
Right.
It's like you're tapping into something universal.
That sense of awe,
Right.
that feeling of connecting with something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
That's what Langan's getting at.
Okay.
He argues that those experiences are a direct link to the teleological economy, a glimpse into this underlying purpose and meaning that's woven into reality.
But if truth, beauty, and meaning are the currencies of this teleological economy, what does that say about the people who control the traditional economy?
Right. It raises some interesting questions about power and influence.
Yeah.
If money is this limited form of telesis,
Right.
then those who control the flow of money, those who shape our economic systems, they have a disproportionate influence on what we value and how we live our lives.
So in a way, they're shaping the flow of meaning in society.
That's a key point that Langan's making. And it ties back to his critique of this globalist elite who he sees as controlling not just economic systems, but also the narratives and values that shape our culture.
So what's the takeaway for the average person listening to this? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by these grand ideas, these complex systems and these powerful forces at play.
Absolutely.
What can we do to kind of navigate this teleological economy, so to speak?
Langan's message is surprisingly simple.
Okay.
Despite the complexity of his ideas.
Okay.
Seek truth. Cultivate beauty in your life and live with purpose.
Okay.
Don't get caught up in the pursuit of material wealth or the illusions of power. Instead, focus on aligning yourself with God with that deeper flow of meaning and truth that permeates the universe.
It's a powerful call to action.
It is.
It's a reminder that we have the power to choose what we value, what we prioritize, and how we want to live our lives.
And that choice is, in a way, the most fundamental expression of our free will.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Into the mind of Chris Langan.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground. Cosmology, consciousness, the nature of good and evil, even the possibility of aliens.
It went deep.
Yeah, it's definitely challenged my thinking. I don't know about you.
Absolutely, me too.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to question.
Always.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final question for our listener.
Okay.
If you had to choose between pursuing wealth or pursuing truth and meaning in your life, which would you choose?
That's a good one.
And why?
Yeah.
It's a question worth pondering, perhaps even worth a deep dive of its own.
Indeed, thanks for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah.
Keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everybody.